Have you ever trusted someone so completely that the thought of betrayal never even crossed your mind? That was me. I trusted my wife. I trusted my best friend. They were the two people I believed would never hurt me, but I was wrong for 7 years. They lived a double life behind my back. While I was building a future for my family, they were busy planning theirs without me. I didn't find out because they confessed. No, I found out because of a forgotten phone buried in the attic. A graveyard of secrets they thought would stay hidden forever. When I read those messages, the jokes at my expense, the plans to leave me once it was safe, I realized something. They weren't just betraying me. They were underestimating me, so I let them dream. I let them believe they'd won. And just when they thought they had it all figured out, I showed them exactly who they were dealing with. If you were in my shoes, would you explode in rage or stay calm and make sure they paid for every lie? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories like this one, because sometimes revenge is best served right when they least expect it. I guess you could say my life was picture perfect, at least from the outside. My name's Eric Matthews. I'm a 43-year-old architect living in Portland, Oregon. For most of my adult life, I thought I had it all: a successful career, a beautiful wife, a son I adored, and a best friend who was more like a brother. Ryan and I met in college. We bonded over late-night study sessions, bad coffee, and big dreams. He wasn't just my friend, he was family. When I married Melissa after a whirlwind romance, Ryan stood beside me as my best man. He toasted to our future, called Melissa the perfect match for me, and promised he'd always have our backs. And for years, that's exactly how it seemed. Ryan was a constant presence in our lives. Sunday barbecues, holiday gatherings, even quiet nights when he dropped by unannounced with a six-pack and stories to tell. When our son was born, there was no doubt in my mind Ryan would be his godfather. Looking back now, I wonder how many of those moments were real and how many were just part of their lie. Melissa and I had what most people would call a solid marriage. We weren't perfect, no couple is, but we shared dreams, built a home together, and supported each other through life's ups and downs. At least that's what I believed. The first cracks were almost invisible. Little things: Melissa changing her phone password without mentioning it, suddenly working late, more often being distant, even when we were in the same room. But I didn't question it. I trusted her. I figured it was just stress, or maybe the routine of being together for over a decade. Ryan, he was still around, still my go-to guy. If anything, he and Melissa seemed to get along better than ever. I thought it was a blessing that my best friend and my wife could be so close. How naive was that? I remember one weekend when I had to fly out for a project. My flight got canceled last minute, and I decided to surprise Melissa and our son by coming home early. When I walked through the door, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Melissa wasn't home. Neither was our son. He was at a sleepover. I found a half-empty wine glass on the counter and 2 plates in the sink. When I called Melissa, she said she was out shopping with friends. I wanted to believe her. So I did. Because sometimes it's easier to trust the lie than to face the possibility that your whole world isn't what it seems. But those little moments kept piling up. Excuses that didn't add up. Glances between Melissa and Ryan that lasted a second too long. Still, I pushed it aside. I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, this was my wife and my best friend. What reason would they have to betray me? It wasn't until I decided to renovate our attic that everything changed. I was clearing out old boxes, dusting off memories from years past, when I stumbled upon a small forgotten storage bin. Inside, beneath a pile of old holiday decorations, was a phone. An old model, scratched dusty. But when I plugged it in out of curiosity, it powered on. I didn't think much of it at first. Probably one of Melissa's old phones left behind and forgotten. But then I saw the messages, hundreds of them. No password, no lock screen, just open. And that's when my perfect life shattered into pieces I could never put back together. At first, I thought I was mistaken. Maybe the messages were old, harmless conversations taken out of context. But as I scrolled, my heart started pounding louder with every word I read. There they were, Melissa and Ryan, not just casual chats, but intimate messages, plans, memories they shared. Without me. The first message dated back 7 years. Can't wait for this weekend. Same place Ryan had typed. Melissa replied with a heart emoji and a comment about how I'd be out of town like always. I kept reading. Their conversations were filled with details about every secret meeting they had while I was busy working late or traveling to secure a better future for us. They joked about how clueless I was, how predictable my schedule had become. One message hit me harder than the rest. "Do you think he suspects anything?" Ryan had asked. Melissa replied, "Eric, no. He trusts us too much. He's too weak to ever question it." Weak. That word echoed in my mind like a punch to the gut. I wasn't just betrayed, I was mocked. I sat there in the attic, the cold seeping through my skin, reading through years of lies. They talked about how once the timing was right, they'd finally tell me, but only after making sure they wouldn't lose financially. They even discussed selling my house, the house I designed and built for my family to fund their new life together. Every message stripped away the illusion I had been living in. I wanted to storm downstairs, call Melissa, and end it right there. But something inside me stopped. Rage wasn't enough. If I confronted them now, they'd spin it. They'd lie. They'd make excuses. And worst of all, they'd walk away with everything they'd planned for. I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. For the next few days, I acted like nothing had changed. I kissed Melissa goodnight, chatted with Ryan when he dropped by, and played the part of the oblivious husband and loyal friend. But every smile I gave them was calculated. I started documenting everything. Screenshots, transferring messages from the old phone, checking bank statements, and highlighting every transaction that connected to their affair. Hotel stays, dinners, gifts. I visited a lawyer, quietly told him everything. He advised me to stay calm, to gather as much evidence as possible, and to protect my assets before making any move. That's exactly what I did. I moved my shares in the firm into a trust for my son. I secured documentation proving which assets were mine. Before the marriage, I even opened a separate account, one they didn't know about. Meanwhile, Melissa and Ryan kept playing their game, thinking they were in control. One evening, as I was working in my home office, I overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. Melissa was on the phone with Ryan. She didn't know I was just outside the door. "After the trip, we'll tell him," she whispered. "It's the perfect time. We'll sell the house, split the money, and finally start our life together." Ryan must have said something funny, because she laughed, that same laugh I used to think was meant only for me. That's when I knew they had set a date. They were ready to drop the bomb on me, after they secured everything they wanted. But what they didn't know was that I was already 10 steps ahead. I decided right then I wouldn't wait for their big reveal. I'd let them believe they were safe. Let them think they were the masterminds. And when the moment was right, I'd show them just how weak I really was. There's a moment when pain stops feeling sharp and turns into something colder, something heavier. That moment came for me the night I realized there was no saving anything. For days, I watched Melissa move through our home like nothing was wrong. She kissed me goodbye, sent me texts during the day, even made plans for a family weekend, all while knowing she was counting down to the day she'd rip our lives apart. Ryan still showed up with his usual grin, talking about sports work and pretending like he wasn't stabbing me in the back. Every second he breathed, I wasn't angry anymore. I was done feeling. I'd wake up, look at my wife, and wonder how I ever thought I knew her. How many nights had she lain beside me thinking about him? How many times had she laughed at my jokes, only to turn around and text Ryan about how clueless I was? The weight of those thoughts became suffocating. But I couldn't let it show. Not yet. I remember standing in front of the mirror one morning, staring at myself. I didn't recognize the man looking back. Tired eyes, hollow expression. A husband betrayed, a friend destroyed. That was the day I promised myself I would not be their victim. They thought they held all the cards. They thought I'd crumble the moment they told me their truth. But I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. When Melissa mentioned their upcoming holiday, she was careful with her words, but I knew exactly what it was. Their escape plan, the final step before they unveiled their betrayal. She smiled at me as she talked about it, as if everything was normal. "It's just a little getaway," she said. "I'll come back refreshed. We can talk about the future then." I almost laughed. Her future was nothing like what she imagined. That night, I sat alone in my office, looking over the folder I had prepared: bank statements, messages, receipts, every piece of evidence meticulously organized. It wasn't just about catching them. It was about making sure when they fell, there was no way back up. I thought about my son. He was the only reason I hesitated. How would this affect him? How do you explain to a child that the people he trusts most are nothing like the heroes he believes them to be? But I knew protecting him meant removing Melissa from any position of power. She wasn't just a cheating wife. She was willing to use me until there was nothing left. There was no turning back, no fixing what was broken. The man I was before, the trusting husband, the loyal friend, he didn't exist anymore. In his place stood someone else, someone patient, someone calculated, someone ready to end this on his own terms. So I made the call. I reached out to a close circle of friends, invited them over for a dinner party the night before Melissa and Ryan's planned revelation. I even called Ryan's parents, people who had known me for over 2 decades, who treated me like a second son. I've been working on a special project. I told them I'd love to share it with everyone. Melissa thought nothing of it. She probably assumed I was celebrating a work milestone. And in a way, I was celebrating the end of their lives. As I finalized the presentation, I felt a strange sense of calm, the kind of calm that comes when you know the worst has already happened, and all that's left is to deliver the consequences. By the time the night of the dinner arrived, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't sad. I was ready. They wanted a future without me. I'd give them exactly that, but not before showing everyone who they really were. The night of the dinner party arrived just like any other social gathering we'd hosted before. Melissa looked stunning, dressed in the same effortless elegance that once made me fall in love with her. She moved around the house, lighting candles, checking on the food, greeting guests at the door, with that warm smile everyone adored. If anyone noticed anything strange about me, they didn't say a word. I played my part flawlessly, the proud husband, the generous host. Ryan showed up fashionably late as always. He clapped me on the back, cracked a joke about needing a drink, and settled in like he owned the place. If only he knew what was coming. As the evening unfolded, laughter filled the room. Old friends sharing stories, Ryan's parents beaming with pride at how close our circle had remained after all these years. Melissa sat beside me, her hand resting casually on my arm, completely unaware that this would be the last time she'd ever pretend to be my wife. When dessert was served, I stood up and tapped my glass lightly, the universal signal that I had something to say. The room quieted, all eyes on me. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. I began, my voice steady, calm, almost too calm. You all know how much I value loyalty, trust, and long-term commitments. Melissa smiled at me, thinking I was about to deliver some heartfelt speech. Ryan raised his glass in agreement. Oblivious. For the past year, I continued. I've been working on a personal project, something that required patience, attention to detail, and a deep understanding of the people closest to me. I gestured toward the TV mounted on the wall. Tonight, I'd like to share that project with you. Melissa's smile faltered just a bit. Ryan shifted in his seat. The screen lit up. At first, it showed photos, family gatherings, vacations, celebrations over the years. I heard a few chuckles, some nostalgic comments. Then, the images changed. Screenshots of messages, hotel receipts, bank transactions. It took a few seconds for everyone to process what they were seeing. Conversations between Melissa and Ryan appeared in bold clarity. Intimate messages, plans for secret weekends, jokes at my expense. The room fell into stunned silence. Melissa's face drained of color. Ryan sat frozen, his mouth slightly open, like he was waiting to wake up from a nightmare. I let the slideshow play, each image more damning than the last. There was no need for me to say anything. The evidence spoke louder than any words ever could. When the presentation ended, I finally broke the silence. I've already filed for divorce, I said, turning to Melissa. And I've provided my lawyer with all of this, including proof that you used our joint accounts to fund your affair. I shifted my gaze to Ryan. As for you, I thought you were my brother. Your parents thought the same. Ryan's mother covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. His father looked like he wanted to disown him on the spot. The rest of our friends couldn't even look at them. Some shook their heads in disgust. Others whispered among themselves, already deciding whose side they were on. Melissa finally spoke, her voice trembling. Eric, I raised a hand to stop her. Don't you've already said enough over the past 7 years? I walked to the door, opened it, and simply said, you both should leave. They hesitated, probably realizing that whatever future they had planned just evaporated in front of everyone they cared about. But eventually they stood up and walked out, faces burning with shame. The door closed behind them, and with it, so did that chapter of my life. The rest of the evening was quiet. Some friends stayed behind, offering support apologies, even though they had no idea what was happening until tonight. Ryan's parents stayed the longest, devastated by their son's betrayal. We had no idea, his mother whispered. You didn't deserve this. I nodded because there was nothing left to say. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I wasn't looking for closure from them. I already had it served cold in front of everyone who mattered. The silence after they left was louder than anything I'd ever heard. I stood alone in the living room, surrounded by the remnants of a life that no longer existed. The friends who stayed behind eventually filtered out, each offering quiet words of support, but no one really knew what to say. What do you tell a man who just exposed his wife and best friend in front of everyone they knew? By the next morning, the news had already spread through our circle. It wasn't gossip, it was shock. People who had known us for years were calling, texting, asking if it was true. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth was already out there. Melissa tried calling me over and over. At first, I ignored her. Then I blocked her number. Her lawyer reached out shortly after. But by then, my legal team had everything in place. The evidence was overwhelming. There was no room for negotiation. Melissa had used marital funds to support her affair, which gave me the upper hand in every aspect of the divorce. I secured primary custody of our son, something I was prepared to fight for, but Melissa didn't even contest it in the end. Maybe she knew there was no way a judge would side with her after seeing what she'd done, Ryan. He disappeared for a while. Word got around that his parents had cut him off financially and wanted nothing to do with him. Our mutual friends, they dropped him instantly. It's funny how fast people distance themselves from betrayal once it's exposed. The house, my house, stayed exactly where it belonged. Melissa had no claim to it anymore. Thanks to the precautions I'd taken before filing for divorce, I heard through the grapevine that she and Ryan tried to move in together after everything blew up. But reality hit them harder than they expected. Without my financial support, they struggled. Ryan lost clients from his freelance business. No one wanted to work with a man known for stabbing his best friend in the back. Melissa's reputation was shattered. Her job became unbearable once coworkers found out why her marriage ended. Within months, their so-called dream life turned into a nightmare. They fought constantly, blaming each other for how badly things had fallen apart. I didn't have to lift a finger. The weight of their own choices did all the damage for me. One afternoon, about 6 months after the dinner party, I ran into Ryan by chance. He looked nothing like the man I used to know. Disheveled, tired, angry. He tried to meet my eyes, but I could see the shame written all over him. Eric, he started like he wanted to explain or maybe apologize. I didn't give him the chance. I simply said, you made your choice. Now live with it. And I walked away. No yelling, no revenge speech, just the truth, cold and final. As for Melissa, she eventually moved out of state. Last I heard, she and Ryan didn't last a year before their relationship collapsed completely. They thought they were building a future together, but without lies to hide behind, they had nothing. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding not just my life, but myself. I poured my energy into my son, my work, and the people who truly mattered. There were hard days, of course, nights when the betrayal still stung, when memories crept in, uninvited. But I never regretted how I handled it. I didn't lash out. I didn't lose control. I let them plan their perfect little future. And then I made sure they watched it crumble with everyone they cared about as witnesses. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone, it's about letting them destroy themselves. And Melissa and Ryan, they did that better than I ever could. It's been 2 years since that night. 2 years since I watched the people I trusted most reveal who they truly were. If you'd asked me back then how I thought I'd feel today, I probably would have said angry or bitter. But the truth is, I feel free. There's a strange kind of peace that comes when you survive betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. I still live in the house I built, the one they thought they'd sell to fund their future, but now it's not just a house. It's a reminder that I didn't lose everything. I kept what mattered. My son, my integrity, and the knowledge that I handled the worst moment of my life with calm precision. Melissa and Ryan. They've become nothing more than a cautionary tale among our old friends. No one talks about them anymore. And if they do, it's only in hushed tones filled with disappointment. I don't hate them. I don't need to. They built their downfall with every lie. They told every plan they made behind my back. All I did was give them the stage to expose themselves. If there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that betrayal doesn't define you, your response does. I could have reacted with rage, burned every bridge, let my emotions control me, but instead I chose patience. I chose clarity. I chose to protect what truly mattered and let the truth do the heavy lifting. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where the people closest to you turn out to be your biggest enemies, remember this. You don't have to scream to be heard. Sometimes the loudest statement you can make is staying calm while their world falls apart, because revenge isn't always about striking back. Sometimes it's about standing still and letting them destroy everything they thought they were building. That's exactly what I did, and I'd do it the same way again.